All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out this afternoon. My name is Michael Chen. I'm the Associate Dean for Students here for Norman J. Radow College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Uh, our Dean Kalkinen couldn't be with us here today, so I'm sitting in for her. And we are super excited to have our guest here today, Team Earley from Make-A-Wish America, the Georgia chapter here with us here today. So we look forward to learning from him and hearing his wisdom. Tim, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Make-A-Wish Georgia do?
Yeah, happy to. First, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Been looking forward to it. So Make-A-Wish, our mission is to grant life-changing wishes for critically ill children. One thing I'll emphasize there, that's not terminal, it's critically ill. It's the biggest misperception about our organization. Unfortunately, as many of our kids are terminal, but not all. It's critically ill. And where Make-A-Wish comes in is to find the right moment to step in and provide these moments of joy that can be very transformational for these families, regardless of the overall outcome. And so we're there to provide joy and hope and strength for these kids. I've been with Make-A-Wish Georgia for around 10 years now. This is year 10. Make-A-Wish is what is known as a federated model, and it's, I think, important for this conversation to understand. So while everyone knows and understands Make-A-Wish as a brand, it's this large, wonderful national brand. It's a federated model, meaning that each chapter is its own independent 501c3. So in Georgia, we cover the entire state of Georgia. We have our own board of directors. We're responsible for raising the funds, finding the kids, getting the kids into our system, and granting those wishes. So when you look at it through that lens, we're very much a small business flying under a large national brand that's also there to provide some centralized support along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, today we're going to talk about the title of our event series is the Lessons in Leadership. So we really want to hear from you about your leadership journey. How did you become a leader, non-profit organization? How do you lead your team? I'll tell you this funny story. So I was listening to a podcast recently, and because I was like, I need to learn about leadership. And the podcast was a CEO, and she ran this, it's a fast food chain. But then the first advice that she gave on that podcast recording was that you need to know which initiatives you want to fund. And you have to go ahead and defund the initiatives that, don't fit your mission. And she was talking about letting people go and such. And I was thinking, that's great for you, but I don't think it works in my context. And probably doesn't work in your context as well, in that sort of very cutthroat corporate sort of situation, right? So let's start by talking about your leadership journey. So how did you say you have been at the Make-A-Wish Georgia for 9 going on 10 years now? So how did you get started, and how did you get there?
Yeah, so my path to Make-A-Wish and into the nonprofit sector was a little less conventional, I guess. I think you see more of it these days, but when I was going through school and taking classes, I never saw myself at a nonprofit initially. The idea of fundraising was something I wanted nothing to do with. And so I was, my first role out of school, I worked for UPS at their corporate office for a few years, went to grad school during that time. And then I joined a large management consulting firm. I was at Accenture for 10 years. And I loved it. And I think just from a learning perspective, I think, certain industries, and consulting is one of them. There's a learning curve there that you get that's just very accelerated. I mean, you're exposed to so many different projects and deadlines and problem solving. And so that was very impactful for me. But there was a point in my career, I think it was the time when my wife and I started having kids, and I was just looking for something a little bit different. And I wasn't sure what that was, but I remember I was going through this, I would call it, I want to use my hours for good phase. I was just looking for some other type of fulfillment. And at that point, I remember I saw a job at the American Cancer Society come up. And the role was something that really interested in me. It was in customer satisfaction research and modeling, which I had some experience in, but I felt like, well, no, I did that a long time ago. I've been on this other path now. And I worried, one, was this going to be a step back in terms of skill and so forth? And two, I had this fear that I was going to be labeled a nonprofit guy. And if I'm labeled a nonprofit guy, then, am I going to be able to go back and make money and do all that stuff I want to do? And to my wife's credit at the time, I was like, because I'm going back and forth on this. And she's like, "What? You've been talking about this, use your powers for good thing for so long. Shut up. Just apply. If you don't like it, go back into consulting or whatever." And so I took her guidance on that. And I went into it with this very set 2-year plan in my head, right? I was like, I'm going to go in and I want to learn. I want to learn nonprofit. I want to learn from these other people, but I want to just do my thing. I want to do it for 2 years, and I'm going to pat myself on the back for being a great guy. And I'm going to go back into consulting and make a lot of money. And it didn't take long once I got into it, but I just got the bug and the passion for working for a mission-driven organization. Like, there's a different type of fulfillment there. I mean, there's the mission itself. There's working with volunteers who are coming out and just selflessly working towards helping you advance your mission. And that was pretty powerful. And then the other thing I learned is this whole I'm going to be labeled a nonprofit guy thing I had wasn't a real thing. It's just this kind of stigma that's out there. But what my 2-year plan did do for me was it really kept me above the fray, right? So I was still fairly young in my career, I guess, at that time. But, whenever we would go through organizational change or promotions and things that give a lot of people anxiety, didn't bother me. I'm leaving in 2 years. Doesn't matter. And it was very freeing for me because what I did is I focused on my work and what I wanted to do. And it was all about, I'm going to advance this customer satisfaction stuff. I'm going to do it the way they've never seen it before. And it was very successful. And to their credit for, what I think is sometimes viewed as a large and bureaucratic organization, it really wasn't. And they gave me the freedom to grow and move. And so then from there, I went and started my own customer experience design team. And I tell people to this day, like, I made it up. And every day I was making it up.
And was this with the American Cancer Society?
Yes.
Within the umbrella?
Yeah.
That you made your team?
Yes. It was a small team that served the divisions of the chapters at the Cancer Society. And I made it up, but it filled a real need that I saw and knew was there. And so we became one of the teams that was the most desired that the chapters in the field wanted to work with. From there was another organizational change, and there was a leadership position out in the largest division. And I thought, okay, well, here's a chance to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to prove that you can lead from a customer experience perspective that I've been preaching everywhere else here and be successful with it. And, I remember I went in for that interview. The CEO at the time even said to me when I walked in, she said, "I'm going to be honest with you." She said, "We invited you here because I looked at your resume and thought, why does this guy think he should apply for this role?" Right? Because I was coming from the national side. I was on the marketing team. It wasn't, we went on to have a great 90-minute conversation. I remember walking out of there. I didn't know if I was going to get the job or not. Yeah. But I was just so thankful for the conversation. Like, it was one of those conversations. Anyway, I ended up with the job. I was all of a sudden over one of the largest chunks of fundraising for the Cancer Society. Still thinking, I don't like fundraising. I don't want to do this. But there I was. But what I was doing in that role was I had a team of, there's probably 200 people under me up and down the East Coast. And at that time, I got recruited to come join Make-A-Wish Georgia. And again, I wasn't really looking at the time, but I got called by a recruiter. And I will tell you, I was drawn to the idea of the mission and the brand. That was exciting to me. But what it really was that they were looking for a CEO. And that what was also interesting to me was that they told me that it wasn't in great shape at the time. And for me, that was very exciting because I wanted the chance to go in and try to fix it. I wanted the chance to go in, apply my skills and see if I could figure it out, which was pretty overwhelming. And when I got there, I saw I had a pretty big hill to climb. But that's how I ended up there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have so many questions for you. Let's back up here a little bit. So you went from corporate jobs, right, from UPS and Accenture,
Yep,
to American Cancer Society. So when you were making that jump, right, with the encouragement of your wife, right, but then so you talk about you felt like it could have been a one-way street, right, like a way of no return. But then, like, what were some of your struggles that you had to overcome? Was it like maybe, in nonprofit, there's this perception that you're never going to make any money, you're going to be poor your whole life, you're signing up for like a vow of like, poverty or something. Like, Could you talk a little bit about that, about, thinking back some of your struggles and how did you overcome those things?
Yeah, I think from that perspective, a lot of it was just that mindset, right? Because I was at that point in my career where, I mean, I would say I didn't know any better, right? And so, I perhaps my first two kids, right, are 4 and out. I mean, at the time, they were probably around 10 and 9,
Okay.
and yeah, and so and look, and I was making good money. We had good annual bonuses, and I was continuing to progress and having exciting conversations about what was next. But there was just something there that was like, I mean, I could have stayed and grinded it out, but there was just something else I wanted to do. I didn't really know what it was. Um, and so when I came into ACS, I think that was part of it. It was um, the stigma that sometimes can exist with nonprofits. I think it's getting better, actually, but I do think it's still there a little bit. And if I look at some of the challenges I face when I'm trying to attract and retain talent, sometimes it can be that, or even donors or corporations. I think sometimes there's this um, perception that we don't have as great a talent. We're not going to be able to pay as well. The work's going to be a little bit easier and not challenging. Like, 'cause I'll talk to people a lot who will come to me. They see my career path and they're like, "Hey, I want to get into nonprofit. Can I talk to you about how you did it?" I'm like, "Absolutely. I love doing that, by the way." And one of the first things I tell them is, so if you're looking to kind of kick back a little bit because you've done whatever work you've done, it won't be for you. Like, it's hard work and it requires a tremendous amount of skill. And I used to go and give presentations when I'd get, like, if I was invited to a conference, I would go in with this chip on my shoulder, right? Because I was the nonprofit guy. I was like, I know everyone in you. I was making this up in my head, to be clear. But I'm like, you're all thinking that you're the big for profits, and look at us. We invited the nonprofit guy, so we'll hear what he has to say, but then we'll teach him some wisdom, which I was always open to. But I would start up every presentation talking about how we're the same. And it was because I have the same issues you do. I've got staffing issues. I've got financial issues. I've got centralization issues. I've got data integrity issues. And we're going through a big Salesforce implementation right now, right? That we're dealing with the things that all businesses are dealing with. But what makes us different is we have this mission that we get to support and fulfill. So when we're making these decisions aren't driven on shareholder wealth or necessarily even personal wealth. It's on how do we fulfill this mission. And don't get me wrong, it's like, from a compensation perspective, we're not always able to pay as well. But some of that might be because we're nonprofit. Some of it might be because we're a small business and we're 34 staff. But we do our research, we do our due diligence. We want to look at what would make us competitive from a salary perspective, and we do our best to try to achieve that. And if we can't on the money, then we look, well, how do we do it in benefits? How do we do it in our flexibility? We have it's a lot of work, but we're very flexible in our working and our hours. We have unlimited PTO. So we try to do other things to offset that and be competitive.
Mm, yeah, that's so awesome. So you were talking about that you were leading a small team at ACS, American Cancer Society, and then either you saw this job or somebody reached out to you, like a leadership job at the national level, right? Was that sort of like your first big leadership job? Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say at that point it really was.
And you mentioned that the person interviewing you was like, "Why are you here?"
Right.
That she didn't believe that you were ready for the job, but after 90 minutes, you prove her wrong, or you convince her. So, like, what was going through your mind, and how did you prepare for that, or was it just like the stars aligned that you worked that?
For that role in that conversation?
Yeah. So, well, and the position too.
Yeah, I think there's a few layers to that. One, I will say how I prepared, and this might be helpful for some of the folks listening. I remember when I prepared for that role, because I felt like too, I was like, this is a stretch. I was like, I think I can be a good leader, and that's what they ultimately need. But as far as like the skills and the fundraising, the events, like, I don't necessarily have that. And I remember this is a very tactical thing, but I remember I went through and I looked at like the job description and the resume, and I went through bullet by bullet and I wrote down, this is how I'm going to answer it. If something comes up in this area, this is how I'm going to answer it. Here's a story, here's an experience, all the way back to when I started working. And so I went into there I was just prepared to talk. Uh, and honestly, when she said, I had to see why you're here, I was like, all right, let's go. Like, I was excited about it because it wasn't said in like a mean or a confrontational or way. Like, it was, there was a genuineness there to like, yeah, what am I missing something here? And we launched into a great conversation. I'd been with the organization long enough too that I could understand and see, I think, some of the challenges they were facing. So I could speak to those and address those. Now, as far as being ready to lead at that point, like there was a lot of learning for me there because it was, ultimately 200 people, obviously not all directly reporting to me, but I had to build a new leadership team. I think some of them were excited I was there. Some of them were not so excited that I was there. And so I think I learned a lot there, but I think there was a time earlier that probably helped me with that. And it was when I was still at Accenture and I was given what was probably my first leadership opportunity, not to this scale, but it was in a role kind of leading a new initiative. And I remember at the time I was still, like I said, I didn't have a ton of experience, but I was performing well. And I think I was held in pretty high regard from some of the leaders there. And so they gave me this chance to lead. And I had, there were people that would then report to me that were peers. There were people that had worked there longer than me. They were in different countries. It was this. And I think, and it was also to start with a fairly nebulous, not well-defined role. And long story short, it wasn't really successful. It really kind of fizzled out and just like went away. And it was like all of a sudden, I just didn't really, it was not like a big thing, but it was just like all of a sudden it was gone and these people didn't report to me anymore. And I think at the time, because of how that happened, I thought, well, it was a nebulous role. It wasn't well defined. Of course, it wasn't going to work out, and moved on. But when I thought about it later, and I think as I learned more, I did take a little more accountability to that. I mean, I did. I think what it was is I didn't have the experience, but they were giving me the chance to earn that. And the thing is, while it was a big and nebulous and maybe not well-defined role, as a leader, that's your job. Your job is to take that and to define it and set a path and be on the way. I think I went into the assumption of, okay, I'm here. Look at me. I'm the leader. Somebody give me the path and I'll execute it like a manager, right? I'll tell me what the path is and I'll go. What they were really asking me to do was set the path. And I think I didn't get that. And that's something I then started to learn as I built my own team at ACS, and then when I went on to the bigger role there.
How old were you when this happened? Right around.
That one was probably late 20s.
Okay. Pretty young, yeah, to have that sort of leadership. Yeah. And it's hard. They were asking you to be a visionary, right? To chart the path for a team and lead them.
It was. No, it was on a little bit of a smaller scale, right? It's not like asking me to chart the path at Make-A-Wish or even at ACS. But, I think for any of us, like if leadership is something that you're interested in, you have to find those opportunities in your role. And it doesn't mean it might be before you're the CEO, it might be before you're the director or something. Like you can find and identify areas to grow your leadership skills along the way.
That's awesome. And then you mentioned earlier that when you got this offer from Make-A-Wish, Georgia, you were intrigued and interested. Partly part of the reason you gave was that you heard that there were difficulties there, right? That things were in a mess. And usually when people hear that, right, people, at least for me, I'll be like, I might want to walk away, right? I really want to. I don't usually put myself into a situation where like, oh, these guys are a mess. I'm gonna come help them fix it, right? But it sounds like you are. Tell me a little bit about your thinking, like what went through your mind, and did you have a vision going in, and or you were like, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? Like, what was that like?
I think at that point it's something that's just a little bit of the way I'm wired. Like I was truly excited to go in there and do it. And I think some of it goes back to how I think I set myself up when I went into ACS with this kind of I don't care attitude. And again, it's not I don't care, like I don't want to do good work. That's all I wanted to do. Like just want to do that. You don't want to focus on any of the other distractions. And I think because I had that, I was excited to do it. And the idea that it was going to be a challenge and it was going to be a mess was energizing to me. I mean, honestly, like I went into it with the idea of if it doesn't work out, then I'm going to go do something else. But I'm going to go in and give it a shot. I didn't yet have a vision for Make-A-Wish, but I knew I was going to need to set one pretty quick.
And if you could tell us a little bit about the mess that you're walking through, what was that, and how did you put things together?
Yeah, it was a few things early on. And, first and foremost, the culture was not great. And, all the people I met was all good people doing good things. But structurally, they were just set up to fail. I mean, they were set up in such a way that they're competing for the same donors. They're kind of walking over each other's work. And they weren't set in a way where the organization could support each other, right? So development or fundraising had a problem with mission, who had a problem with marketing, who didn't like operations. Like it was like that. And I remember the first day I walked in and I came out and I met everyone again, lovely people. But then, as soon as I went in, someone from every department came in and I was like, so let me tell you what's really going on here. And I remember I closed my door at one point. I was like, this isn't Make-A-Wish. Like this, you don't think Make-A-Wish and think you're walking into that, right? Like Make-A-Wish is about joy. And like you walk into our office now, there's an energy and there's an enthusiasm that you feel. And people want to work with us and engage with us because that energy and enthusiasm, like it radiates off our team and people want to be a part of it. So one of the first things we did is, so from a staffing perspective, there were a few changes we had to make and where it just wasn't a good fit. We had some that were just a drain on the culture. How they got there is another story, but it was a fact. There was the kind of thing, there are always hard decisions. But we exited a few people from the organization. It was the kind of thing where when they walk out the door and you literally feel the whole organization just like that, right? It was pretty powerful. So some of those moves, which you have to make as a leader. And then also I looked at the structure and said, okay, we have to fix the structure. And so from a fundraising perspective, we were all events. We had a gala, a golf tournament, and a walk. And events are great, but you live and die by events. So I was like, so like any business, so we have to diversify our portfolio. So we will have events, but we will have events that have an ROI of X, right? So I had $100,000 event, but man, it was a nightmare for staff to put on and run. And so we sunset it. And at the time, my board members were like, oh, so now you have $100,000 hole to fill. How are you going to do that? And so that's a little intimidating coming in when you're trying to, money is a big issue. But I knew or felt, right, that if we diversified the portfolio, so we'll do these events, but we'll also focus on corporate giving and major gifts and planned giving. And these are the things that are going to pay off, of course, in the short term and the long term, that'd be a better way to go. So we offset the 100,000 pretty quick because I freed up staff that were getting, sucked in all of this time to do other things, like to go meet with a company and, have them sponsor a wish for $20,000 and give them a great experience where they can connect with the kid. And now they're going to be back every year doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And there's other ways to, so like for the golf tournament, we have third party events. So now we don't do a golf tournament ourselves, but we have a lot of companies and we have people who will do a golf tournament on our behalf. And so from a resource and a cost perspective, it's great. It doesn't cost us anything. And we show up and help staff the event the day up, but they do all the work, all the fundraising, and we're the recipients of that. So organizationally, the change there was important. And just the overall structure within the team as well. I did set up we had one program we set up and it was called our Detours program. We would allow individuals or companies to sponsor our wish. And it didn't even cost a lot to do it at that point. And so it seemed like it wasn't a good return on investment for us. So I brought in a team together, and I brought them in from different departments. And they were also individuals that I know that were talented. I knew they were good. I knew we wanted them, but I also knew they didn't get along. I thought I was being really clever. And what I did is I pulled them into this room and I said, I want you guys to redesign this program for us. And they're like, we already have this program. I said, no, we don't, because if I ask you, and you to tell me, you're all going to give me a different answer. So let's come up with what this new program is going to be, and then let's go from there. And they're like, all right. They got kind of excited. Like, that sounds good. And I was like, all right, well, so we'll get back together. I said, I'll come back in a week and see where you are. I started walking out of the room. They're like, where are you going? I said, no, you guys are going to do this. Okay. Not me. And they did. And they came up with what's now one of our most successful programs. And I even had someone come up to me after, and they were like, I'm really glad I got to work with so-and-so this way. And now, like, they formed this great partnership across as individuals and across the teams as well. So trying to, find those opportunities for your good people.
That's awesome. So Tim, it sounds like that's such a genius move. So you came to the organization, right? It was a mess, but then you made strategic staffing changes. You hired some new people there, you let go some people, and during our lunch earlier, you mentioned that you poached somebody from, was it United Way?
Cancer Society.
But
they met her there.
Yeah, so you poached someone, or hired someone in strategic.
Potion. But I do think I used that word, to be fair.
And you brought them in and you gave them so much freedom, right? You put them in a room, you asked them to come up with an idea, and then let them run with it. So you have people working for you, but they're also leaders as well. Mm-hmm. So what do you look for? What stands out to you that you're like, okay, this person is great. I need to hire this person. I need to bring them into the team, and it will change the culture here. What are some things you look for?
Yeah, so it goes to some of the values I mentioned earlier, right? So we look for people who are, both joyful and engaging, and that has to start with our leadership team. That has to, they have to want to be out there and want to kind of share in the joy and the mission. And we say, we want them to be joyful. It doesn't mean they have to come in and be a ray of sunshine every day, right? We all have hard days, but it is, we get to work for this wonderful organization that brings joy, and that's such an honor. And so that needs to be embedded into our people as well. We want leaders and staff that are driven and take ownership, right? So there's that certain kind of drive that we want to see. I always tell my leaders, my team, I don't want someone to have to push. If I got to reel you in from time to time, that's great. But no one have to push. Let me reel you in. Just run. If you're going too fast or too far, I'll reel you back in. But otherwise,
So how do you figure that out from a 30 minutes to 60 minutes interview? Because everybody comes into an interview doing a good talk, right? Of course, if you can tell if somebody really did their homework, right? Like what you described earlier with your own interview. But how do you, in that interview, what do you look for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think over time, those with experience, we would just kind of know what we were looking for. And so we would ask questions around it or examples around that would get at that. And then you could also tell just by how the person was presenting themselves with their answers, and how invested they seem to be in themselves and their own growth, and then Make-A-Wish and the mission. And then fairly recently, we went through an exercise where we felt like we had a pretty strong team. So we went through an exercise where we reset some of our own local core values around what it is that we look for. And so now what we've done is begun to construct a list of questions that we can ask and what we look for when we're hiring people. Because we went from this time where the culture wasn't great to where it was really, really great.
How long did that take?
Honestly, it's one of the things that surprised me the most. We flipped the culture quick. And for something like culture, it was, because it really was I thought this is going to take forever, but it really was. It was just, it was a few people that we had to move on. It was setting the structure right. And then it was also letting them see that they could win. We had to get a few key victories early on. So we had this one engagement with Chick-fil-A. They came to us and we're interested in doing something at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. They wanted to do an activation from a marketing perspective. And this was the last year at the Georgia Dome in the national championship game before they took it down. And
Okay.
we had a Young Wish kid come out named Andy, and she came out saying "God Bless America" after between the first and second quarter. And so when they approached us about doing this, we knew it was going to be a lot of work, and we didn't have the staff and the bandwidth. It was going to be a lot of work. It was going to take folks from the mission team. It was going to take from the fundraising team. It was going to take folks from the marketing team. And I said, listen, I know this is going to be a lot, but we have to start. We can do this, and this is a great way to get let Chick-fil-A get to know us, and we're going to have a chance to put our brand in front of 70,000 people just inside the Georgia Dome. There's a video online of it, and it's great. She's out there singing. They did the card stunt where it says Make-A-Wish Georgia all around the stadium. And that was kind of a pivotal moment for us because I think from a staff perspective, they worked together and it was really successful. And so once they started to kind of see and feel we can win as a team, I think success begets success. And they found more ways to win.
Gotcha. Yeah. And sorry I interrupted earlier, but going back to what I had asked earlier, right? So we started talking about in a short interview, right? What you were looking for, right? You talk about people who fit with the mission, who are joyful, people you don't have to push. And then so like what specific qualities? You said at some point you just start to know what to look for. Like you have these core values that you build questions from. Anything else that you sort of look for? That quick 60 minutes?
I mean, obviously, depending on the role and the position, right? We're looking for the experience. I think one of the things we look for is to what extent do they understand the role, and then how do their skills and background and experiences delve into that. But then we're also looking for people who want to grow within the organization. And then one of the challenges we have, because we're a small organization, is always sometimes it's like long-term career pathing. That's something we're really working on and trying to figure out. But there is still areas for personal development, personal growth within the organization and in every role.
That's awesome. So let's pivot here a little bit and talk about, so we have some students here in the room. So talking to our students here, especially or our younger staff members, if you could go back to the young Tim in his mid-20s, late 20s, right? And to tell him about leadership, what would you say?
I think there's two main things. One is something that I learned eventually, right? But it's the idea of vision and what the path to achieving a strategic vision looks like. And there's a graph. You just Google it, like you'll find it. And I started throwing it in all my presentations. But it's like what most people think vision looks like, and it's a straight arrow, right? So it's here, and then there's your vision. And then the next picture is what it actually looks like. And you have your beginning point and end point, but the line in between, it's like that, right? And that's true. That's so true. And I think just that representation of how to achieve a vision is so important. And so it was kind of freeing for me to think about it that way. And so I tell my teams all the time, when we set big, lofty goals or, multi-year goals, sometimes you think, well, how are we going to do that? Or how are we going to stay on plan? Well, you set this long-term goal and then you start to figure it out in increments. And if something changes or something's not working, you don't have to stay on that straight line. You can deviate and do something else. But the vision doesn't change. We're going to end here and we're going to get there one way or another. And so we did. So when COVID happened, so we're starting to hum along finally as an organization. All of a sudden it's a pandemic and 80% of our wishes just like that go on hold, right? We have families with plane tickets getting ready to head to the airport or get on a boat, and we have to call them and say, hey, you can't go.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, so from a wish granting perspective, like operationally speaking, we have referrals that just continue to come in. And so we have to grant them a certain rate so that every kid can get their wish. And all of a sudden you start building this backlog because they're coming in, kids are still getting sick, but we're not able to grant the wishes. And so I remember we're getting ready to set our budget for the next year and our goals. And I walked into my board chair and I said, look, so I can give you an annual goal, but we both know I'm making it up because the world is turned upside down and nobody knows what's going to happen. Like this was like early COVID. And he was like, you're right. And he said, what do you think we should do? And I said, let's just give ourselves a longer runway. Instead of saying what we're going to do in a year, let's say in 2 years, 1,000 Georgia kids will get their wish. We've never, by the way, done anything close to that. That would be 500 wishes a year. We've never done anything at that point. Had never done anything close to that. And the idea was, well, we know we might not be able to grant 500 wishes this year. You're saying we're going to grant 700 the next year. I said, I don't know. All I know is 1,000 Georgia kids are going to get their wish. And if that means we find a way to raise the money and find the kids to grant 1,000 wishes, we do that. If we look to assistance from other chapters who have capacity because they had some money, but they couldn't grant wishes for their kids, maybe they can come in and help. So we found creative ways to make that happen. And there was a point in year 2 where it became like inevitable that we were going to hit this goal. Right. But I mean, we had to, the idea was,
And that was also during COVID.
yeah, it was during COVID and as we emerged from COVID.
Wow.
We actually emerged from COVID stronger than we went in.
Okay. Wow. That's yeah, very daring too. But yeah, bold to have set that vision. Was it like back in 2020 maybe? Yeah, to set that vision.
It was 2020 when we set that, and then we achieved that. And I'll tell you what, coming out of that is then when I think the team really was like, there's nothing we can't accomplish. So we go on to set bigger goals then. But I think the other thing that I wish I had learned or would say is that my job as a leader is to provide a safe place for high performers to thrive. Right. So my job is to set the vision and then I clear the path and I make it so that other high performers can come in and help deliver and fulfill that mission. And so I have to be very protective of that from a culture perspective and for their staff. Like I need to make decisions and they need to see that I'm making decisions and taking actions that allow them to perform.
Okay. So you have like maybe a select team that you sort of protect but elevate them as well, like gives them more freedom. Is that right? Is that how that works?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to, it's not, I can't do everything myself, nor should I do everything myself, nor do I have the ability to do everything myself within the organization. So you want to look to others to do that. And everyone has a role that they play within the team that elevates the organization and moves it forward. My job is to clear the obstacles, but also to make the decisions that keep us moving forward.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, obviously you're a great leader, right? It sounds like your team loves you and you guys had really good wins since you took the reins there. Tell me about, just for you, right? It sounds like you're a great mentor to your staff members, but then who is mentoring you or who has been mentoring you and what are they like? And what did you learn from them?
I think whenever I'm asked that question, I don't have one set mentor, I would say. But I think I have a lot of people who have played really great mentoring roles for me. Even today, I have the chance to work with a lot of folks who are successful entrepreneurs, businessmen, businesswomen. They're C-level officers at big companies, or across a number of different industries, or even other CEOs within Make-A-Wish. It's a very talented organization and group. And what I would say on the mentorship side, what I always try to do is just to listen. I think early in my career, I was thinking about this the other day. I remember because my daughter she's in her first job out of college and she's working now. So we talk about, these things. It reminds me of when I was just starting out. I can remember being in a room and in a meeting. I feel like I was maybe one of those new employees sometimes that talked a little too much. And imagine that. And it wasn't that I was trying to be, the smartest guy in the room or something. I was genuinely just excited, right, to be there. And I think there was something to that. But what I learned and I realized pretty early on is I got to just chill out a little bit and listen. And so I started to listen, especially people who had more experience. And then I would learn from them. And I'm also someone that feels like you can learn something from anyone. If there's somebody that has a skill in something that I don't do, I take great enjoyment in just sitting back and watching them do that. So if it's like playing the piano or rowing a canoe, whatever it is, like if you do it well, like there's something to that. And so when I'm talking to other leaders or people who have had success, I like to just kind of absorb and listen, and I see what's worked for them. And then you kind of take what works for you, right? So I'm not going to replicate myself completely after somebody else, because that's not me. But what I can do is see, well, here's something that, Michael said or he did, and I really like that. I'll think about that and how can I implement that? Maybe that becomes part of me as well. And so I think it's just the evolution of you as a person and a leader. So I just kind of take the bits and pieces that I see or hear that I think work for others, and then you just evolve it into your own style. And I think in that way, like everyone should have their own unique style of leadership with similarities and some core fundamentals that go across that.
Is there somebody specifically that you admire or who has mentored you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I have a handful of past board members that I was very fortunate to work with. Again, especially when we're going through a tough time as an organization. I went through a succession of board chairs that were, I think, instrumental in shaping probably, where I was when I started at Make-A-Wish, and then kind of the leader that I am today. So I think I came into it with some experience as a leader and doing these things. I think that's part of the reason I got the opportunity. But over time, it wasn't like, okay, I'm here now. I'm going to fix this and I know it all, right? I'm going to continue to learn and to lead. So from a nonprofit perspective, yeah, I probably knew more than anyone else that was, on the board and how to run that. But there was so much leadership experience there that I could look to, any one of the last several board chairs that I've had. Yeah, got me that.
That's awesome. And so we have a few minutes here before we transition to a direct Q&A with the audience here. So you mentioned, you were really thankful for your board members in taking you through some of the challenging and difficult times, and you appreciate their wisdom. If you could name one challenge or difficult time that you had to go through to take your organization through, what would that be, and what lessons you learned from that time?
So I mentioned COVID. That was a really difficult time for us. I think another difficult time where I really leaned on some of the individuals that I mentioned, was early on when we were transforming the organization. So I mentioned like what we did from a staffing perspective, from a structure perspective, from a fundraising perspective, like all of those things that involved like inside that part of the organization. I was like, okay, I've got this. So that was kind of my experience, my background. I brought in people who could help me to do that. What I didn't have a lot of experience in, and that was probably one of my biggest challenges, was that I needed to grow the board itself. The board, because of the state of the chapter, again, all good people doing good work, but they were almost forced to come in and to get into the operations and the weeds of the organization. That's not what you want. That's not what your board members want. Not if they're good board members, right? They want to operate up here and they want to support you from a strategic perspective, from a fiduciary perspective. And that's the role that they play. And so, but I had some who were so far into the weeds, it was tough to get them out. And I understand why. But so some of the board members that I mentioned, there was Rick Elliott was my first board chair, and then I moved on to a woman named Tammy Farley, and she was significant in helping me to start to kind of get some of these board members to unwind from the weeds. And she was a successful entrepreneur in her own right who had grown a business very successfully. And that's my mindset, right? So it's a nonprofit, but I think about it as a growing like business, and I went into it like it was a startup. And so she was instrumental in helping me just kind of know, these are the things you focus on. This is what's important. And here's who we need to help us get there. And then, after that, I had Tim Crow as the chief HR officer for the Home Depot at the time. So he had years of executive experience. And at that time, we had now evolved to the point where our board needed a little bit more of, kind of that executive polish and presence. And we're not the Home Depot, but why shouldn't our board operate with some of the same structure that the a big company board like they would operate at? And so we brought a lot of governance and strength to that as well. And then my next two board chairs, Bruce Ford and Jeff Flowers, also accomplished executives who have really helped to kind of get us through COVID. And now that we're through that, we're kind of on to the next big thing for our organization. And Jeff's taking us through that right now.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much. We have about 15 minutes left for questions directly from the audience. It can be anyone here in the room or online. Jane, thank you so much for monitoring that. Do we have any questions from the audience? And once you ask the question, I will repeat the question and then we'll give them a chance to answer. Yes, sir.
So, Tim, in the nonprofit space, how do you lead two different groups of people that have natural frictions within their mission? So you set up an operational mission to have 1,000 kids get their wish within 2 years. You then have to go to your development team, who needs to raise the money to carry out this initiative. That they could feel like they're on the back burner of something that they didn't get to have a choice. Development and finance can add some of the same frictions. I've raised the money. Not technically you have. So how do you create that to have everybody be excited about their work when they could have some natural friction within the office culture?
Yeah,
So I was just going to say really quick, excellent question. So the question was, if you have two teams, right, and they have sort of different functions within the organization, and sometimes there might be some friction there if one group is for fundraising and one group is operations, right? So how do you coordinate that if there is a conflict there or a mismatch of where teams going?
So it's a great question. You actually described the dynamics that could exist very, very well. Even what I say is that, and I think we're a pretty healthy functioning organization, but we still have, some of that friction, the accountability. And so, I mean, what we did is we have our strategic plan that we built, and it's a 5-year plan, and it's to get to this point. And within that, we have our pillars, and everything rolls up into that. And I think at the end of the day, it's all of the goals ultimately come together as one. And so it's almost like one can't thrive without the other. Like they're just, it's all kind of joined together. And we meet as a leadership team every week, and we go through what are we trying to accomplish for the year? What are we trying to do in the quarter, and how do we get there? And we're able to start working through that together. So everything we do at that level, we're doing together. And then the leadership team we have is very tight, like in a good way. Like it's a great team. Like we get together in these meetings and we'll argue and we'll debate, but then I'll make a decision and then we move forward, and we move forward as one. And then whether or not there's friction below that, it really depends on how that comes down from the leadership team. And because they have such good relationships, and they want to work and they support each other, I think that plays a big factor in how the teams and the departments then work together towards the shared goals. So we rolled out 1,000 wishes. It was kind of all in. And I think having this idea of, hey, I haven't said exactly how we're going to do it. It's one way or another, we're getting there. It allows us then as a team to sit down and figure out, okay, well, we're going to do this and we're going to raise this and that's how we're going to do it. And then, here's the marketing initiatives we use to support that. So it really just kind of becomes an all-in mentality. We just kind of rise and fall together. I think that's one of the strengths of the culture right now.
So awesome. Any other questions from the audience?
So as the leader of the organization, I know there's so many kids that you come across and so many wishes that you fulfill. Can you give us one that just really was so impactful on maybe your perspective in life or the things that you do?
Yeah, it was, I wish to blast off in our red rocket ship, travel through outer space, land on the planet Saturn while I meet a little green alien named Bebo. And this was a young boy named Zayden. And it's a wish that we talk about in Georgia quite a bit. And there's some cool videos out there on it as well if you look them up. And I mentioned that one because for a number of reasons. Every wish we do is impactful, and from the most simplest wish to the most complex, like there is a magic that's in every one of them that is truly so powerful and special. With Zayden's wish, though, it was also a turning point for the chapter, sort of in the spirit of Andy's wish to sing, in front of 70,000 people at the Georgia Dome. Zayden's wish to do that was seemingly impossible, right? So it was like, well, how are we going to do this? And at the end of the day, I remember I was at a place called the Goat Farm in Atlanta, and I was there because there was a young VR company called Trick 3D that wanted us to come in and see their new VR technology. VR was pretty new at the time, and I go in there thinking this is going to be cool. I'm going to create some kind of neat donor experience with this. And we're looking at it, and then the wish granter who's on my team is, we could do this for Zayden's wish. I'm like, who's Zayden? And she tells me this is his wish. At the time, we were thinking, well, we can send him to space camp or something like that. But that wasn't really the heart of his wish. His wish was very specific. And all of a sudden, and this is the magic of wish granting, is community. All of a sudden, the Trick 3D folks are like, okay, well, we could do this and we could do this. And then, we're surrounded by all these creative types from different industries and sectors that are kind of showing up what they do. Before I know it, we're in this huddle of probably 50 people. Well, we can do this and we can do this. And it just snowballed from there. We created this great experience. We created this VR experience that replicated what Zayden's, in his mind, his journey was supposed to be like. Dobbins Air Reserve Base got wind of that we were doing it, and their offices across the street from us pretty much. And so they're like, oh, you should do the wish here. So we did the wish in a hangar with servicemen and women, in full salute all around. We executed that wish, and it was just like, it just kind of put us on the map. We won awards for it nationally. Again, it showed the team like there's nothing we can't do. So we always kind of go back to that one, but it was so impactful for us. We actually invited donors out to that wish. We put them in another hangar and we live streamed. We don't do this usually. Because you never know on like wishes are, they're happening. You never know what's going to happen. And, but we created a separate experience and everyone was on board with it, but we didn't want to interrupt the purity of his experience. And so I was talking to the crowd of, donors and corporations in the room. And I said, so we're doing a live wish right now. So I'm going to talk to you about Make-A-Wish, but at some point I'm going to get the call that we're blasting off and I'm just going to stop talking. And that's what happened. And he went. I had a donor walk up to me right after it, handed me a $10,000 check and said, keep doing this. And we did. And so that really kind of set the tone for us in wish granting.
Yeah, Tim, I was just going to say, Laura sent me the video. It was so awesome. Just, you should Google this, right? What keyword should they use for that?
Make-A-Wish Georgia and Zayden. Zayden.
Zayden. But then I watched the video, right? The things that stood out to me was just the level of detail you all went through, the choreographing the whole thing, right? You had a former astronaut there, like counting down. You had the team, the VR team. They build the environment, right? The video, the graphic design, right? They built all of that with this one kid. It was pretty incredible, and it was a big production too. It's like they made a movie out of it, and just still they did all that for one kid. That's the power of Make-A-Wish Georgia. Thank you guys for doing the big work. I think it's time for.
We have one online. Oh, one when you layered up.
Thank you so much. All right, so this question is from Meredith. You mentioned your daughter is a recent grad at her first job. What do you think is the most important attribute for college graduates, entering the work field, whether that be the commercial or nonprofit sector?
That's a really good question as well. I think it's really trying to find something, and so bear with me because I don't want this to sound like too simple an answer at first. But it really is simple. It's finding something that does align with your interest and something that you want to pursue. And I think especially if you're a recent graduate, don't put as much pressure on yourself maybe for like that that first job. My daughter certainly did. Like there was all kinds of anxiety on, what's the first job going to be and where is it going to be?
And I look, pressure is coming from that, right? None of the pressure.
I don't think it wasn't for me. Actually, for my daughter, Erin, it was self-imposed. She's one of the ones I got to reel in. I don't have to push her. But I think it's really finding something that aligns with your interest in something you're curious about, because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to want to pursue. But if you get into something and you realize you got it wrong, then go do something else. And I'm not saying go year to year and hop around. That's you don't want to do that either. I think that happens a little more frequently now than at least when I came out of school. But I think there's a balance there. I think if you find something you're not happy and you're not fulfilled, you got to find something that makes you happy and fulfilled. And that's when you're going to find the most success. Like I think for me, again, I could have continued to grind and do what I was doing. I probably would have jumped and gone to maybe another firm or done something else. And it, I think it could have been fine, but I kind of made this step into something. And ever since then, it's just been, I just do what I want to do. And again, don't take that as I don't want to be successful. I don't want to be well compensated for what I do and achieve those types of goals. I do. But I'm able to do that more effectively and with more life balance if it's something that I love.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, when you made that shift, did your kids ask you, like, were they anxious? Back when you were shifting from Accenture to American Cancer Society, were they like, what is going on here? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not my kids, but my mom, right? So my mom, she's 89 now. But over the course of my career, right? So, and she grew up, she grew up in rural West Virginia, not a lot of money, got out of there. And then, was very successful with my dad and so forth. And she just came from a different time. Right. And I remember when I first got my job at UPS, and even more so because back then at UPS, you had to show up with a suit and tie every day. Right. And so she was like, my boy, he's wearing a suit and tie every day. He's at UPS. It's like before they went public, it was the largest private. It'll be there forever.
Yeah.
Right. And I went to grad school and I left and I went to Accenture. Well, I went to Accenture at the time, for some of you might remember, for a brief moment when I was there, it was Anderson Consulting. And so I said, hey, I'm going to Anderson Consulting. She's like, consultant? What's that? Like, what's consultant? That doesn't sound like, that's not UPS. And so, but I went, and then she started to understand, well, I mean, it's one of the biggest organizations in the world. It's, it's pretty lucrative, and I was having good years. And so I was like, so then you're back on track. She's like, that's my boy. Again, all of a sudden I'm like, hey, so I'm going to work for ACS. I'm going into nonprofit. I remember she literally went, nonprofit? Like no money? Like what then to you? Yeah. And I was like, no, this is going to be great. It's okay. And it's the American Cancer Society. It's been around longer than you have. Like it's, and I went there. And again, I think I was happy. I think as far as my wife and kids, I think they noticed a difference and a change in me, going, from consulting into something else where I liked it there, but I think I loved it here. And then, for my mom, I think seeing that and then seeing the just kind of growth from there. And then, we send her pictures. My kids come to events with me and things like that. So for a while at Make-A-Wish, she would always, she would just post on our social media all the time, but always be like, congratulations, Tim. Way to go, Tim. I'm like, no. It's Make-A-Wish, George. Like, I don't deserve credit for most of this. Like, it's the team, but yeah. But so they did notice that, like, that's where the shift was, I think, for my family, was they noticed. They thought I seemed happier in general.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So we have time for one last question, and we always close with this last one. So what is the most valuable lesson that you have learned as a leader, and what would you do different?
So I think as a leader, I would start off by saying that growth is hard, whether that's individual and personal growth or growth of a business and an organization. But it's also fun, right? That's where you find the fulfillment. And where I found that was a moment in my career from a leadership perspective where I decided to just let it go. And what I mean by that is as you move and progress, you continue to acquire skills and accolades and projects or whatever it is, experience. And at some point when you want to move on to the next thing, it might mean that you have to let go of something else that you were doing. So when I was at the campsite, I had success with that big project and I'd built a reputation around that and everyone associated my name with that. Well, when I wanted to start my own customer experience design team, it was for a while, I wasn't ready to quite let go of that because that was kind of my anchor and it was, it's gave me staying power. Everyone knew me for that. But I wasn't doing anything with the customer experience team yet, not like I wanted. And so finally, and I kind of turned over the reins to the other guy on the team, who frankly was probably more qualified to do it than I was anyway. And when I finally just said, you know what, it's yours, I don't have anything to do with that, everything just started to roll for me. I felt to me, it felt like there's nothing I can't do now. And it wasn't more from perspective of, I'm unstoppable. I guess maybe it was just like, there's nothing holding back. Like, I'm going to do this for a while and then I'm going to let go of this and be free of that and go on. Because as you move on and as you grow, you have to then let go of this stuff and you have to rely on other people and other leaders to take on some of the work. Being a leader doesn't mean that you continue to add to your plate just so you can show that I can do more work better, faster than everybody else. It means that you are able to elevate other people to do that work and do it better than you ever could. And that's what I have now. If I look across my organization, Make Wish Georgia, there's a number of roles. It's probably actually every role but mine. There's somebody in that role that can do it better than I could. You do not want me to be a wish granter. You do not want me to run a fundraising event. But what I am able to do, I think, is I surround myself with good people. And then you find these opportunities and you allow them to level up. It allows you to level up, and in turn, it allows the entire organization to level up, which for us means we grant more wishes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's such a generous way to put a theme on your leadership role and your leadership philosophy. You're so generous in letting go, but then allowing people to grow and to become the leader under your mentorship too. So
yeah,
thank you all so much.
Thank you.